We're living in a time where questions of energy sustainability and climate change are top of mind. If it's one thing we've learned from COVID, it's that there's not just a need, but also an opportunity to rethink the way we do things. I've spent the majority of my adult life studying, living, and working abroad, yet Jamaica will always be home. My home, Jamaica, like many Caribbean islands, stands to suffer significant economic implications as a result of external dependency on fossil fuel-based energy and climate change. In Jamaica, like many Caribbean islands, the electricity costs are amongst the highest in the world, which makes doing business expensive in Jamaica. In terms of climate change, on average, the Caribbean suffers a hurricane-related cost of over 2% of GDP annually. In 2004, Hurricane Ivan alone resulted in a loss to the country of US $525 million, or over 8% of GDP. With the expected increase in frequency and intensity of hurricane-related damage, the economic implications are staggering. Renewable energy has the potential to be an economic driver for Jamaica. The cost of electricity from renewables are coming down, with solar and wind already competitive with fossil fuel-based electricity generation. Renewable energy also offers the potential to build a climate-resilient economy by moving away from centralized energy systems where a single hurricane has the potential to wipe out electricity for the entire island. So how do we take advantage of the opportunity offered by COVID to do things differently and rebuild better? My colleague, Mark Dennis, in this segment, will look into this further. Mark has over 10 years experience in renewable energy in Jamaica, and he will guide us through his journey in how to advance towards 100% renewable energy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with a question. Can I not help Jamaica transition to a greener, more diversified, and more productive economy? Let's find out. Renewable energy technologies such as solar, wind, and hydro have two big limitations: dispatchability and flexibility. With dispatchability, you can only get power whenever nature makes it available, and available in the right portions. With flexibility, despite advances in technology, storage, distribution, and portability remain huge challenges still. Also, since more than 95% of our energy infrastructure and technologies, including transportation and power generation, are built to work with liquid fuels, it means for the most part these technologies are impractical solutions for breaking our fossil fuel dependence. Fossil fuel has remained king in Jamaica because it is abundant, it's energy dense, it's easily and cheaply stored and distributed, it's easy to handle, it has great portability, and it's easily converted into useful energy. It made natural sense to me then, several years ago, that the most pragmatic solution to transitioning to a clean and green economy was to upgrade our current fuels to a carbon-free and a carbon-neutral drop-in. Think about it. If you have an old light bulb at home that you know is the source of your high light bill, you're not going to go changing the sockets, wiring, and switch. You're going to upgrade that old light bulb to a new efficient one. The current fuel that we have is the old light bulb, and we need to upgrade it. So in 2015, I put a small team together of like-minded professionals, and we started looking at clean fuel options. I had a particular interest in renewable hydrogen and biofuels, and biofuels was the lowest hanging fruit and least expensive solution at the time. So we narrowed our focus there. Now, apart from the obvious energy benefits, one of the biggest advantages of developing a biofuel economy we learned early on are the massive positive socioeconomic impacts and spin-offs. Renewable energy technologies such as solar, wind, hydro, as great as they are, just involves installing, commissioning, and maintaining these technologies and the systems that support these technologies. More than 3/4 of the process chain for these industries happen outside of Jamaica. On the other hand, for biofuels to be price competitive, the feedstock has to be grown, nurtured, processed, converted, and of course distributed here. So it creates jobs in agriculture, agronomy, transportation, processing and manufacturing, chemistry, biology, engineering, and research and development. Up to 50 times more jobs can be created than that compared to solar, wind, or hydro. And that's because the entire process chain is here in country. And also the waste that's generated in processing to biofuels, we have found can contribute to other industries and products, namely pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, fertilizers, and even bioplastics. And these are critical benefits now, considering the impact that COVID-19 has had and continues to have on Jamaica and our economy. But biofuels do have their own challenges, and that's based on the feedstock we found. And ideally, we've learned that your feedstock should meet several critical criteria. One, it should not compete with food. It should not compete for prime land. It should not be space or land intensive, which means the yield has to be relatively high. It should be continuously abundant and always available. And lastly, and probably most important, it should mirror as closely as possible the performance characteristics of the fuel it's replacing. So when we started our journey, we looked first at waste vegetable oil, which is WVO for short. And at first glance, WVO seemed a good feedstock. We were solving a huge waste disposal problem. We were avoiding the land issues altogether, all while achieving our objectives of developing our upgraded fuel. But the deeper we dug, the more we found some huge drawbacks with WVO. Firstly, we would have to depend on large restaurants, hotels, and cruise ships to get the volumes we needed. That has serious implications for being able to guarantee the frequency and the volume of our feedstock, and, of course, the biofuel supply. Secondly, it turns out that Jamaicans reuse their cooking oil way past what I imagine is recommended best practice. In a short experimental phase where we collected WVO from several restaurants, we found the quality horrible, it was inconsistent, and oftentimes we really couldn't tell if what we were looking at was WVO based on how it smelled, based on how it looked. It would be difficult and expensive to maintain any sort of acceptable quality for that type of biofuel. Thirdly, as small as Jamaica is, the cost for the logistics to pick up, transport, and deliver WVO from across the island to our processing facility would have made such a venture unfeasible. And lastly, after we crunched the numbers, even if by some chance we were able to collect all the WVO generated in Jamaica, we still wouldn't have enough to even put a dent in our fuel demand. So WVO was out, and we started to look at castor beans. And at the time, castor beans was being heavily researched and promoted by the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, the PCJ. And it was being promoted as a feedstock of choice for our emerging biodiesel industry. And it seemed to tick all the boxes. It's prevalent and abundant. It can grow on marginal lands. Its yield is relatively high. It can simulate fairly closely the performance of conventional diesel. And it didn't compete with food. Castor beans, though, and more specifically, Jamaican castor oil, is best known worldwide for its pharmaceutical and nutraceutical benefits. And we found that this was a main problem. These benefits had pushed the value of the beans high, and farmers realized that they could get 20 times or more income by selling their beans to the pharmaceutical or nutraceutical industries compared to that of the fuel industries. So castor beans was out, and we continued our search for this ideal plant, and I think we found it. It's a plant called Jatropha curcus. Jatropha curcus, also known as Physic nut, is a crop with origins here in the Americas. And it's been used by indigenous peoples in the Caribbean and Latin America as well for the last 200 years. It was traditionally used for internal and external medicine, hence its nickname, Physic nut. Currently, it grows wild in most Caribbean countries, including Jamaica. I had never heard of this plant before, and chances are most of you have never heard of it before either. But it had apparently developed a reputation as one of the top biofuel crops being researched and developed by scientists and engineers across the globe. It has gone from 936,000 hectares under production in 2008 to over 13 million hectares under production as of 2015. It is in fact on everyone's top 10 list of biofuel crops, and for a very good reason. First of all, not only does it not compete with food, it competes with nothing else, not pharmaceuticals, not nutraceuticals. Its primary use right now is for energy. The second benefit is it has the highest yield, second to algae, which is important for developing large amounts of biofuel from relatively small areas. The third benefit is it thrives in tropical climates, which is expected because it originated here. But it's also drought resistant and it can grow on marginal lands. In fact, you can plant a bean or cuttings in your backyard and with very little effort have a thriving jatropha tree in a year or two. The fourth benefit is the waste that's developed from processing the nut. All have available secondary markets. And last, and probably one of the most important points is, of all the biofuel crops that we've researched that can bring biofuel to the market now, it best mirrors critical performance characteristics of fossil fuels. So much so that it is one of the leading crops in the development of biojet fuels. Numerous successful test flights have already been completed by numerous airlines. We've developed a pilot project to use 600 acres of old sugarlands with relatively high salinity because it's close to the sea. The 600-acre farm will be run as an agri-park with plots of 50 acres being managed by farmers under a lease arrangement with us. We are developing a relationship with academia to lead our R&D efforts, which is critical to us because through R&D, we want to develop our own processes and procedures that are specific to our local conditions. And we also want to find ways to increase even more the yield, which may involve genetically modified versions of the plant. With the success of the pilot, we're going to use that knowledge and scale it. We want to put roughly 30% of our farmer cane lands into jatropha production. This will allow us to achieve 10% replacement of all diesel that's imported and burnt. In addition to that, it will create thousands of jobs in multiple sectors and disciplines, create new industries, bolster older industries, all that will help in the development of our country and our GDP and our economy. And in addition to that, we'll be repurposing thousands of acres of old sugarlands to productivity. Jatropha undoubtedly has shown significant promise, but surprisingly, it remains mostly scientifically unexploited, which makes it largely an undomesticated crop. But that's what excites us the most about Physic nut, the fact that it has so much more to unleash. So let me ask you again, can a nut help Jamaica transition to a greener, more diversified, and more productive economy? I think so. Thank you.